Just ahead, there's another edition of the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I'm Executive Producer Michael Yaffee.
And Michael, a pleasure to be with you again this week. We're going to talk about all sorts of political issues, national and Florida. The primary voting, the official primary voting day, approaches inexorably as the grave approaches us. Did I say that? Well, we'll have some observations on the Florida primary and much, much more for you to chew upon as you go through your day. We invite you to stay put. The Florida Roundtable begins following these messages.
Wow, your flowers are gorgeous. What's your secret?
It's no secret. It's Bear Advanced.
You mean these blue bottles?
Uh-huh. I protect my beauties with all-in-one rose and flower care. It's insect and disease control plus fertilizer.
Really? What's this 12-month tree and shrub protect and feed?
Oh, I use it on my trees. It kills bugs for up to a year, plus it feeds. It's that easy. Hey, where are you going?
To get my own. I want a great yard, too.
Bear Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. Always read and follow label instructions.
One time he forgot to fuel up the boat. And it wouldn't be the first time he left his tackle box behind. On one trip he even headed out without his lucky hat. And seems he almost always forgets to wear his sunscreen. But he never forgets to wear the one thing that could save his life. Life jackets save lives. Wear it, Florida.
Visit myfwc.com for more information.
Here's a special message for those of you who owe the IRS at least $10,000 or more in back taxes. The IRS has special programs in place that could eliminate or reduce your tax debt by thousands of dollars. Call the Federal Tax Management Helpline that has been set up for you, 800-267-1344. Stop the wage garnishments, levies, and tax liens now. Once you've qualified and enrolled, the IRS will stop all the collection activities against you. These unique programs have been allocated to help the economy and significantly reduce or eliminate your tax burden. The IRS is currently accepting reduced settlements and other favorable programs. You may qualify for substantial savings, so get the help you need. If you owe more than $10,000 in taxes, call for free information and to see if you qualify. Take down the number now for the Federal Tax Management Hotline, 800-267-1344. That's 800-267-1344. 800-267-1344.
This is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I'm Executive Producer Michael Yaffee.
We are delighted to have your company. We know you have lots of choices out there, and Michael and I are always very pleased when you elect to spend a few minutes with us. We hope we provide you with useful information and things that you can talk about around the water cooler and things of that nature. Well, primary day nearly upon us, and if you were here a couple of minutes ago, I said the primary election is approaching us as inexorably as the grave, and I have to admit that is a line that I stole from Boris Karloff.
Oh, okay. I'd never heard it before.
He was fond of using that in some of his narratives, but gee whiz! I mean, the commercials you can't get away from them.
Yeah, but it's that time. That's what happens.
Interestingly enough, a couple of observations. The Florida NAACP wanted to have a candidates' night in Tampa. Invited everybody, huh? And guess who showed up?
On which side? On both sides?
Yeah. Out of 7 of them, who do you think?
I'm gonna guess DeSantis.
The only person to show up for the NAACP candidates' evening was Andrew Gillum.
Oh, okay.
The mayor of Tallahassee. All the rest of them ignored it like it wasn't even there.
Wow.
Which I think is a shame.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, Andrew Gillum is black, but
is that saying that the other ones have written off that? I don't know.
I mean, you could almost understand the Republicans because, the NAACP is not usually friendly to the Republican Party, but you would think some of the other Democrats would have shown
would
up.
all show up.
I think Republicans should show up, though. I think the Republicans should try to get that vote.
And that is one of the ways and manners in which they can help to win some of that back.
Yeah, I think there's a chance for them to win some of that back, but they have to try.
They have been steadily losing that vote since 1936. And, it certainly couldn't hurt to try to get it back. Invest a couple of hours in time, Well,
I agree.
I've been looking at this thing, and boy,
do you have a prediction?
Well, I tell you what, we have been known to do that on this program from time to time, and sometimes we're right, and sometimes we have to come back the next week and eat some crow or a humble pie or whatever it is. I've done that, so we're not afraid of it. But I thought maybe I'd go out on a limb here, and I would start with the Democrats. And boy, is it confusing. I don't know where Jeff. One commercial has Jeff Green saying Donald Trump, he's a great guy, and of course the other commercials say he's the only one who'll stand up. He confronted Trump in his own living room.
It wouldn't be political season if it weren't confusing.
Well, I see the Democrats this way. I'm going to Gwen Graham by a nose, Phil Levine second, Jeff Green third, and 4 and 5 is interchangeable between Andrew Gillum and Chris King.
Wow.
I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Well, I think Gwen Graham. Yeah, by a nose as well. Although I don't think Philip Levine will be second. I think he'll be third.
You think maybe Jeff Green will be?
Yeah, I think Jeff Green will be second.
Okay. Well, he lost the U.S. Senate race a couple of years ago. He lost a race as a Republican for Congress in Kentucky several years ago. But he's out there spending his money. On the Republican side, I think it's going to be Jeff DeSantis, either
Ron DeSantis.
I'm sorry, Ron DeSantis by a large margin, or Adam Putnam by barely a nose.
Yeah, I'm going to say DeSantis as well.
Well, it's going to be an interesting time. A couple of seconds here. You've got some other venues that folks can hear you.
Yeah, what you want to do is follow me on Twitter at BeyondReasonR, or you can search for me on iHeartRadio on your iHeartRadio app. Just search for Beyond Reason Radio.
And Michael Yaffee has got great material that he shares all the time with these things, and I think you'll enjoy doing that, so we hope that you will pick up on some of those other things that are going on. And, of course, Michael and I will be back next week. We'll either be saying, see, we told you so, or we'll be down here in the kitchen fixing up some crow to have. So We'll find out. The Florida Roundtable will continue in a moment.
A pretty common problem in our area is black and green stuff on outdoor surfaces. You scrub it off and it comes right back. You need something that will keep it clean. Wet and Forget. It keeps surfaces clean for a year or more. Just spray it on and leave it. Make cleaning easier. Pick up a bottle of Wet and Forget today at Lowe's, Walmart, Ace, or visit wetandforget.com to find a store near you.
Your yard's days of being picked on are over, thanks to the science of Bear Advanced Brush Killer Plus. Its penetrating formula is specifically designed to kill hard-to-control brush, like kudzu, poison ivy, poison oak, and wild berries, roots and all. And the concentrate product even kills stumps, so your yard never has to worry about being bullied. Bear Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. BearAdvanced.com. Always read and follow label directions.
In a world of tiny tomatoes and backyard pests, one man and his better half dig deep to save backyard gardens.
Joni, stand by to upload expert videos.
Already loaded, Tom.
Wow, you're good.
You're not so bad yourself.
Tom and Joni McCubbin star in hisandhersgardening.com. Critics rave.
Tom and Joni, they really grow on you.
2 green thumbs up.
Don't miss hisandhersgardening.com.
Wow, your flowers are gorgeous. What's your secret?
It's no secret. It's Bear Advanced.
You mean these blue bottles?
Uh-huh. I protect my beauties with all-in-one rose and flower care. It's insect and disease control plus fertilizer.
Really? What's this 12-month tree and shrub protect and feed?
Oh, I use it on my trees. It kills bugs for up to a year, plus it feeds. It's that easy. Hey, where are you going?
To get my own. I want a great yard, too.
Bear Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. Always read and follow label instructions.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And Michael, as promised, at this point in the program, we are joined by Chris Garcia in the D.C. area. And Chris, welcome to the Florida Roundtable.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Wonderful. It's summertime in Florida. Primaries are approaching in our state. But we're going to do a detailed look at many of the important issues in the economy affecting not only Florida, but the entire United States. And, Chris, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and take a minute or so here up front. You were a high-ranking official in the Commerce Department. Give us a little bit of your background, your education, and how you got into politics and how you ended up at Commerce.
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, it's not a cookie-cutter path, that's for sure, but I did have the pleasure of serving as a senior advisor to Secretary Ross, as a principal advisor to Secretary Ross. When my father gave me the opportunity when I was, I was just a young boy, but the first doors that I knocked on as a young boy were for George W. Bush and his reelect. And that was a particularly interesting time because it was my first exposure to politics. So my training, my background is in investment banking. That's my profession, but I got involved in politics at a young age, got to know and learn the conservative principles of free market, capitalism, limited government, strong national defense, tight, secure borders, and frankly, that's what I identified with. And my father, being an immigrant from Mexico, seeing the corruption that exists there, it's not something that he wanted to see in his new country. And so when he and my grandfather immigrated here legally back in, I want to say it was the late 60s, they wanted to make sure that they instilled those American values in us as young boys. So my brothers and I all grew up, very, business-minded and respecting authority and the U.S. government. And so you fast forward and you look at an administration today where there's an opportunity to try to return power to the people and try to drain the swamp, as they say. And you find that this was a perfect opportunity for me to come in as a Pepperdine University graduate and alumnus, as a Bill Gates scholar, and to come in and serve the country from the private sector.
That is quite a ride, and you've done a wonderful job thus far. On the top of everybody's mind, we started talking about tariffs and trade wars and all that sort of thing, and maybe faded a little bit from the headlines, but it's still there, and perhaps a complicated question to answer. But I want you to take a look at this situation with China. I almost don't feel like we are engaged in a full-blown trade war with China. But where do you see us in that regard at this point?
Right. So we have to go through just a little bit of the history of how we got here. In the past, administrations would just throw their hands up and say, well, I guess that's how it's going to be from now on. We're just going to make things in China. That's how it's going to be. And that ended up decimating many of these heartland cities across America. People were losing their jobs. Factories would close down. We couldn't compete with China anymore. When we allowed China into the WTO, the World Trade Organization, in 2001, we expected a communist regime to play by the rules. We expected them to play by the rules like all of the other free market economies would. Unfortunately, that was not the case. We saw China manipulating their currency. We saw them stealing intellectual property from companies in the West. We saw them forcing companies that wanted to sell it to the Chinese market to enter into joint ventures with Chinese companies to turn over their technology if these companies wanted access to the Chinese market. And then we've seen just outright barriers, tariff barriers to entry into the Chinese market. And so in the past, administrations were so hesitant to escalate any type of action because of the fear that it would affect the consumer base here in the U.S., that it would affect households across the United States. But what's unique about President Trump's strategy is when he came into office, he knew right away that we had very poor deals with China, with the EU, with Canada, with Mexico. And his first order of action was to put us into a position of strength. That meant deregulation. That meant tax cuts. That meant making it easier for businesses to hire and expand and grow. And that has put us in a position of strength with the strong economy that we have now to go into these renegotiations and say, you know what, China, enough's enough. We're not going to put up with your IP theft. We're not going to put up with your tariffs. We're not going to put up with your devaluation, your manipulation of your currency. We're here to play ball, and China's at the breaking point.
I think there are a lot of conservatives and Republicans who would agree with you on these kind of tactics against China because, like you said, China has not been playing by the rules. But the Trump administration has also been doing this against the European Union and Canada and Mexico. I mean, what's the justification for that? Well,
the way that we would traditionally approach this is we would take one at a time. And in effect, President Trump is taking these negotiations one at a time. Take a look at NAFTA, for example. We attempted at first to renegotiate in a trilateral fashion with both Canada and Mexico simultaneously. The president saw that that was not going to happen. The president likes bilateral deals. He likes negotiating one deal at a time. And so what we've done with Mexico is we've sensed that they have a unique political place that they're in now where they have a new president that was just elected who will, of course, play ball with President Trump. It looks like they have a friendly relationship to start. But they have an incentive. The current administration in Mexico has an incentive to strike a deal with the United States because once the new administration comes in, then it just further delays, it further pushes things back. And so we're really looking at the end of August to get a deal struck with Mexico first. Then you go to Canada. And Canada, by the way, 20% of their economy depends on exports to the United States. A whole 1/5 depends on exports to the United States, whereas only 2% of our economy relies on exports to Canada. So Canada has to get it right. But what President Trump has done is he's taken that systematic approach with NAFTA. If you take a look at China, China actually approached the European Union and tried to make a deal with the EU. The EU said no and actually came to Washington, D.C. We saw that a couple of weeks ago when the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker came and met with President Trump. They agreed. The biggest thing, and I'm not talking about the 4 agreements that they reached in terms of exports, in terms of reducing the trade barriers and the tariffs. The biggest headline out of that was that now it's the EU and the United States in unison against China. And that puts China in a very very difficult position with their weak economy, negotiating now from a position of weakness. And so that is in effect what the president has done. He's taken his careful selection of allies to partner with to really tackle the most serious offender in these trade violations, which is China.
Let me ask you now, I want to focus for a minute or two on Mexico here. 25 plus years ago or thereabouts, when NAFTA first came into being, we had U.S. senators sit here in the studio with us, Democrat and Republican, and they had concerns for Florida. And here what I'm talking about is the pass-through to Joe Citizen, the guy on the street. And I sat in this room and heard predictions made that Florida tomato farmers would be put out of business, and Florida farmers in general. Of course, it hasn't happened, but what should this mean to Sally Sue as she's in the grocery store shopping here? What is the pass-through that the common person needs to be aware of?
Right. So the average American, if you will, your average consumer, you go into the store, you might see, just in the short run, and this is why it's so important to keep in mind the long-term effects of these negotiations. In the short run, of course, these retaliatory tariffs, mostly with China reacting in the way that they have, where they're imposing another $34 billion of tariffs on U.S. goods that are exported to China. That's probably one of the more drastic effects that we'll feel in the short run. In terms of Canada and Mexico, I don't know that will necessarily have a dramatic effect, but if anything at all, with regard to agriculture, with regard to some of these truly American products like, whiskey and bourbon and, blue jeans and so forth, the average consumer is not going to really feel the effects. However, what happens when you have an increase in tariff barriers where we're not selling as much, you're going to see actually a drop in demand, and many times that will reduce cost. But if there's anything that's going to happen in the short run, there might be some of these components that we import from China that we're slapping tariffs on. Again, those 25% tariffs or the increased tariffs in steel and aluminum. There might be a little bit of cost increase, but really not much. You're talking about a couple pennies here and there.
What is the goal of this administration overall? Is it to get rid of tariffs, across the board on both sides, or is it, protectionism? Higher tariffs actually helps our economy.
Yeah, so that's a beautiful question to ask. That's exactly the question that we need to be asked. That the administration needs to start pushing out more. The goal is to get a fair and free trading system. None of these tariffs that distort the market. I think that free market conservatives, libertarians all agree that tariffs, any type of government intervention, distorts the market. But what also distorts the market is people who cheat, countries that cheat. And so all President Trump is saying is, in the past, administrations were not able to get China to the table. They weren't able to renegotiate these trade deals. They weren't able to get them to stop stealing our IP. So he's got to take an unconventional approach, and I think, if anything, we can describe President Trump as it's unconventional, and it's been very productive. What he's looking to do is drop all the tariffs across the board. So they call it the 3 zeros, and this is what National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow says. He wants the 3 zeros. Number one, you want zero tariffs. Number two, zero non-tariff barriers. Those are those forced joint ventures that I talked about, where you turn over your IP to the Chinese. Number three, you want no subsidies. So no more manipulating the price of your goods, and it's what they call dumping. And that's why the Commerce Department has these anti-dumping measures that they take. They investigate these countries. They see if the state is subsidizing those goods, and thereby reducing and artificially manipulating the price so that American companies can't compete with that price. And then they get an unfair advantage. But those 3 zeros, zero tariffs, zero non-tariff barriers, and then zero subsidies, that is the ultimate goal of the administration.
All right. On that note, we're going to have to take a pause along the network line here. We are visiting with Chris Garcia, former senior advisor in the Commerce Department. This is the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And we'll continue in a moment.
Here's a special message for those of you who owe the IRS at least $10,000 or more in back taxes. The IRS has special programs in place that could eliminate or reduce your tax debt by thousands of dollars. Call the Federal Tax Management Helpline that has been set up for you, 800-267-1344. Stop the wage garnishments, levies, and tax liens now. Once you've qualified and enrolled, the IRS will stop all the collection activities against you. These unique programs have been allocated to help the economy and significantly reduce or eliminate your tax burden. The IRS is currently accepting reduced settlements and other favorable programs. You may qualify for substantial savings, so get the help you need. If you owe more than $10,000 in taxes, call for free information and to see if you qualify. Take down the number now for the Federal Tax Management Hotline, 800-267-1344. That's 800-267-1344. 800-267-1344.
Florida's boating environment is always changing. New sunsets, new experiences that you won't find anywhere else on Earth. But one thing that never changes: boating while impaired by drugs or alcohol. It's illegal in the state of Florida. Boating under the influence will land you in jail, or worse, kill someone you love. It's just simply not a risk worth taking. Learn more about Florida's boating laws at myfwc.com. Brought to you by the FWC Division of Law Enforcement.
Your yard's days of being picked on are over, thanks to the science of Bear Advanced Brush Killer Plus. Its penetrating formula is specifically designed to kill hard-to-control brush, like kudzu, poison ivy, poison oak, and wild berries, roots and all. And the concentrate product even kills stumps, so your yard never has to worry about being bullied. Bear Advanced. Get more from the Blue Bottle. BearAdvanced.com. Always read and follow label directions.
Terrorist acts and shootings are often described as great tragedies. They are not. We live in a world so concerned with being politically correct that they're afraid to call evil what it is, evil. Man's sin nature is as old as the Garden of Eden. Many love to blame culture, poverty, or lack of education and opportunity as the problem. They may have a good or bad impact, but the big problem is sin. Acknowledging our sin nature will show us our need for a Savior who changes us from within. That Savior's name is Jesus. He came to die for the sins of all who will acknowledge their sin. Faith in Him strikes a mighty blow at evil. So quit calling man's evil acts a tragedy. They are evil and God hates it. Yet thankfully, He loves us in spite of our evil and sin. Jesus not only forgives us, but gives us the want to overcome evil with good. This is Brian Wright, speaking right from my heart.
All right, crew, let's get her dug.
Honey, you want to give me a hand? I'm planting that tree, remember?
No matter how large or small your digging project may be, no matter how urban or rural, you must always call 811 before any digging project. 811 is our national one-call number, alerting your local utility companies to come out and mark any lines they have near your dig site. You must call 811 at least 2 to 3 business days before any digging project, so you can avoid hitting our essential buried utilities. This includes natural gas and petroleum pipelines, electric, communication cables, and water and sewer lines. So before you do this or this, make sure you do this. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811. Brought to you by Common Ground Alliance.
From Pensacola to Key West and all points in between, you're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And our special guest this day is Chris Garcia, former Deputy Director at the United States Department of Commerce. And Chris, we thank you for spending some time with us today. We know that you are a very busy man. We've been focusing on tariffs and whatnot. But one thing that struck me, and it's a problem that's been ongoing here for a number of years, and you mentioned it in here, one of the items with the Chinese is the intellectual property theft. And I wanted you to talk about that for a minute. And how tariffs and it enters into this picture. A lot of people in this country have been hurt by this intellectual theft business, and I want to hear your take on it.
Sure. So it's very simple, and I think it would be good to start with just a brief explanation of how this world trading order is supposed to work. If you're a business, you're based in Florida, you manufacture widgets, whatever it is. If you sell to the United States, you're only reaching maybe 5% of the total consumer market in the United States. 95% of the consumer market exists outside of the United States. So if you really want to grow your business, you really want to start growing and scaling your business, you're going to want to sell internationally. Some countries we have free trade agreements for certain industries, and that's where it gets a little complicated, where there are no tariff barriers that are imposed on U.S. exports. But some countries outright have these barriers to entry that really make it difficult for, let's say, a Florida business to sell to the country. One of those countries is China. So what happens is you have two types of IP theft, and I'll call both of these versions theft. The first kind is outright IP theft. We saw that back in 2015 when it was reported that China had stolen the blueprints of the F-35 fighter jet. That was an outright IP theft. You have Silicon Valley as well that has complained significantly about the barriers to Chinese entry to the Chinese market. And then, of course, you see if you've ever been to a swap meet, you might see the fake designer handbags, the finer Guess handbag, the fine Guess or Louis Vuitton handbags, or fake Nike or whatever it might be. And usually those are manufactured in China, so that's IP theft. And then you have outright pirating, of course, in the movie industry. So that's the first type of outright IP theft. The second type of theft is when a company is looking to sell into the Chinese market, and China has a policy whereby, and there are certain industries that they target, but they have a policy that says, okay, Mr. Florida Incorporated company, if you want to sell your product to the Chinese market, the technology, the intellectual property behind your product, you have to share that with a Chinese company, and that's a way for China to try to embolden and bolster their own domestic economy and boost up Chinese companies by forcing, they call the tech transfer. It's a forced tech transfer from a U.S. company to a Chinese company, and that, I would argue, is an outright form of theft as well. And so those two types of IP theft have really been rampant, and frankly, China's been probably the worst actor because they have the largest economy. But that's been a real thorn in the side of U.S. companies and other Western companies that play by the rules, that want to just sell to a larger market. And so that's been a big problem the president is tackling and is currently tackling right now with the support of his trade advisors.
Obviously when we're talking about IP theft, it's not necessarily that the government is doing this, but businesses in China are doing this, individual businesses and business owners. But is it that the government is helping them, or are they just looking the other way and not enforcing IP laws?
Well, they don't have their own IP laws the way that the United States has IP laws. What we have here is, of course, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. China has a quasi-IP, domestic IP organization, but the overall IP organization that should be governing is the WIPO, the World International Intellectual Property Organization. But again, these large bodies that are supposed to regulate and manage multiple countries with multiple jurisdictions, it's a very slow process, and oftentimes the damage will have already been done. And if the IP has already been stolen, what's your recourse? They already have your trade secrets. If you're a U.S. company and someone in China stolen your property, stolen your intellectual property, they already have your trade secrets. Now it's even more difficult to recoup those losses. And so this is why the president's taken unilateral action, against much the chagrin of some other allies of ours or those around the world. But if you go through the WTO and you try to fight these IP theft incidences, and you have these claims that you file, this could take years. They could take years. And so the president says, American companies don't have years. We're not going to put up with this anymore. It's time for us to put our foot down. And right now, with the strong economy that we have, this is the time to do it.
Now, in the long run, when we take this picture as a whole, this tariff and trade negotiation and whatnot, where do you see that going? What does it mean to the job market here at home in the United States?
Yeah, well, this is where we're in a little bit of a conundrum because we're doing so well. It's kind of even humorous, and I can laugh about it because it's such a good thing. We have more jobs available in the United States than we have unemployed people to fill those jobs. So the way that you get that to change is we have to train our U.S. workers to fill some of these skilled jobs that are unable to be filled currently because we don't have the supply, the labor supply of skilled workers to fill them. So the president just took action recently with an executive order where he's directed the heads of agencies in the administration to explore ways and to start job training programs that will enable and equip American workers with the skills that they need here in the 21st century to fill these jobs that have been unable to be filled for years. And so that's a very, very positive step in the right direction. What I anticipate happening is if we truly unleash, and I don't think we're doing very well right now as a country. I don't think we've truly unleashed the power of the U.S. economy. I still think that we have not reached full employment. I still think that we have not yet reached the full capacity. But what's going to happen is once we get these level playing fields with our trade allies, our trade partners, that's going to release just a robust, a U.S. economy that will require further labor. So we have to have the we have to have the labor supply to be able to fill the jobs that are going to increase. What's going to happen is that ultimately this trickles down to the average American, because American businesses will be able to hire more. They're going to need to grow. They're going to need to expand. And they're going to need to hire more American workers. And so we have to make sure that we have whether it's our young people, whether it's people who are currently unemployed who are still looking for jobs, people who don't have the ability, the skills required for some of these jobs, we're going to need to make sure that the American workers are ready for this robust increase of jobs that are going to open up in the near future.
How do we make sure that, though? I mean, what steps can be taken to actually get people the skills they need?
Yeah, well, no, that's part of what President Trump's executive order was all about. Just recently, he had the executive order on job training and workforce development that directs each of his cabinet agency heads to put in place some type of program within their agencies, and this is the way that it usually works: is the president will sign an executive order. Oftentimes, he'll partner with the private sector, and so in this instance, you had FedEx, General Motors, IBM, Lockheed, Microsoft, Walmart, you name them. There were about 20 or 25 companies overall that joined with the president, and they formed what's called an American Workforce Policy Advisory Board. And so you bring together governors of states, business executives, the administration, in some cases educators, and certainly what happens as a result is you can affect not just the current and existing labor force by training these individuals through certain programs that are established by companies or established by governors and states, but you can also tap into the education field. So creating a career and a technical education model at high schools across the country. There's a model currently, I think, being explored called P-TECH.
And Chris, I'll tell you what, hold that thought there, because we're going to have to take a break along the network line, but we want to hear about this thing, P-TECH. We have to remind folks that this is the Florida Roundtable. We are a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our very special guest this day is Chris Garcia. He is the former Deputy Director of the United States Department of Commerce. We're talking tariffs and all sorts of things that affect the economy that get passed through to your life as an individual. And if you'll stay put, we'll continue in a moment.
Want to fly somewhere? Looking for cheap flights or cheap tickets? Then call. That's right. Call the low-cost airline travel hotline now for prices so low we can't publish them anywhere. Low-cost airlines has all kinds of cheap travel deals. Fly domestically and save up to 75%. You can even fly internationally and save even more. Yes, fly anywhere in the world and save a lot of money on your plane tickets. We'll even save you money with cheap travel deals on hotels, rental cars, even complete travel packages. So don't book your tickets until you call us first for the absolute cheapest prices on U.S. and international airline tickets and hotels. Call right now for prices so low they can't be published. Travel experts are here 24/7 to help. 800-754-4531. 800-754-4531. 800-754-4531. That's 800-754-4531.
Terrorist acts and shootings are often described as great tragedies. They are not. We live in a world so concerned with being politically correct that they're afraid to call evil what it is, evil. Man's sin nature is as old as the Garden of Eden. Many love to blame culture, poverty, or lack of education and opportunity as the problem. They may have a good or bad impact, but the big problem is sin. Acknowledging our sin nature will show us our need for a Savior who changes us from within. That Savior's name is Jesus. He came to die for the sins of all who will acknowledge their sin. Faith in Him strikes a mighty blow at evil. So quit calling man's evil acts a tragedy. They are evil and God hates it. Yet thankfully He loves us in spite of our evil and sin. Jesus not only forgives us, but gives us the want to overcome evil with good. This is Brian Wright, speaking right from my heart.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And our very special guest this day is Chris Garcia. He is the former Deputy Director of the United States Department of Commerce. And Chris, let me say at the outset of this segment, we really do appreciate all the time you've spent with us here today. We know that you are a very busy man. And we had to kind of interrupt the train of thought there to go into that commercial break. But you were talking about P-TECH, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to come back and finish up that thought.
Yeah, no, you bet. And I'll say, Reagan and Mike, I get excited every time I talk about this, and so it's important to make sure that your listeners and really Americans across the country understand that we have a real labor shortage right now. We have a very serious skilled labor shortage. We have currently more jobs available in the United States than we have people to fill them. There are more people. There are fewer people unemployed than there are open jobs. So how do we solve that problem? Well, the president has signed an executive order recently in July that brought together governors of states. It brought together companies like IBM, Walmart, Microsoft, Lockheed Martin, FedEx, and it directed the various cabinet agency officials and these federal departments to work with education, state, and business executives to train the current workforce and high schoolers. IBM has a career and technical education model. It's called P-TECH, and it's used across, 75 or so high schools across the country. And students can enroll for grades 9 through their graduation and earn both a high school and an associate's degree in science, one of the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, or math. And these are the types of programs that we need to equip our young people so that they can hit the labor force, hit the job market with a great, not just a high school diploma with some skills and some technical training, but also an associate's degree that puts them on pace, whether it's one of the STEM fields or whether it's one of the trades. I was just speaking with somebody recently that said that, as a journeyman, you come in as an apprentice and you become a journeyman. You work a couple of years in the plumbing field, and you could very quickly make $100,000 in your 20s as a plumber if you know what you're doing and if you follow that path. And so I think a lot of young people that wanted to get their hands dirty, that want to get do some of these jobs that are going to be opening up with the increase in retirement from American workers, they'll find it very lucrative. And so this is what the president's doing, is he's putting in place these programs and expanding these programs so that we have a trained and ready and capable American workforce.
And I think you kind of just answered my next question there, but which was, in other words, you have done a good job of explaining what all this means to us and where we're at in relationships with various countries, Canada, Mexico, China. We have this position, and in your notion of how does I talk to people about economics, and you start talking about it, and a lot of times their eyes just sort of glaze over, and you've lost them. And so your recommendations on how do you inform the American public, or how do you sell this program to make people understand this is a good thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, it starts with having great programs like yours, great stations like yours, and shows that will have folks on that can explain what exactly is going on in the administration. You wouldn't believe how many people will call me up and say, "How are things going in Washington?" It seems like it's a circus. These are people calling from California to Texas to Arkansas to all over the country, and they're saying, they're calling me from Florida. They're saying, "Hey, what's going on up there?" And so we've got to have more administration officials, and we have to have more people, really surrogates out there telling the truth about what's going on at the White House, across the administration, what the president's doing to tackle some of these issues that have plagued the United States for years. And so, frankly, I think that it's important to explain it in terms that people understand and get. And at the end of the day, everybody wants to know, how is this going to affect me? How is this going to affect my bottom line? And so I think putting it in those terms and letting them know that the president is looking out for America first, that's the most important thing. Is the America First agenda is what the president is after. It's what he's doing. And frankly, it's something we should all get behind and jump on the train for.
You had mentioned earlier that even with these tariffs, the American economy is really growing, is really booming right now. What do you think is really fueling that growth?
Sure. Two major things. Number one, it's the deregulation that the president put in place at the start of the administration. So, again, when a business is looking to grow, just to get down to brass tacks, if you have all of this paperwork, you have all this compliance to deal with, all these federal regulations and so forth, it's going to slow the growth of your business. And so what President Trump did is he took a very careful look and directed his cabinet secretaries to look through their bureaucratic processes and take a look at how you can ease the regulations on businesses to help them grow. So that's number one. Number two is he passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Congress got behind it because of President Trump and the White House's initiatives of their efforts. And what happens when you have tax cuts, when you're paying less in tax, that means you've got more money you can invest in your business, more money you can invest in growing and scaling. And so those are the two main policies that have allowed President Trump to lead our country to such a robust economic growth.
Chris, one final question here on a personal note, and you've done an excellent job for us here today, but what's up next for Chris Garcia? What's on your calendar and in your future?
Sure, yeah. So after leaving the administration, I actually joined an organization, a company called Vicker Financial. We do pre-IPO consulting for companies that are looking to enter the public market. And I wanted to make sure I got it on the radio, got on television, and told the American people about what's really going on at the White House, certainly at the Commerce Department, and telling the other side of the story that doesn't seem to be told. So if folks wanted to follow me, they could find me on Twitter at Chris Garcia USA, or you can find us online at vickerfinancial.com, VICAR financial.com.
All right. Well, Chris Garcia, again, we want to say thank you for spending all this time with us today. Your commentary, an eye-opener, and I hope that people paid close attention because there was much to be learned in what you had to say. And we would like to invite you to come back a couple of months from now and bring us up to speed and an update on where we're at.
It'd be a pleasure, guys.
All right. Chris Garcia, the former Deputy Director of the United States Department of Commerce. This is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
A brief closing thought following these messages.
Have you written a book? You can become a published author with Dorrance Publishing, the nation's oldest publishing services company. Countless authors have trusted Dorrance for nearly 100 years to bring their book to the market. Our professional team will edit your text, design your book pages, and create an appealing, eye-catching custom cover. Plus, our authors benefit from a custom book promotion marketing campaign that makes your book available where people buy books, like Amazon and brick-and-mortar bookstores. So make this free call right now to claim your free author's guide to publishing. Don't wait another day. Take one step closer to realizing your dream of becoming a published author and seeing your name in print. You've already written a book, so the next thing to do is make this free call right now to Dorrance Publishing and get your free guide to publishing. Call right now.
800-485-6003. 800-485-6003. That's 800-485-6003.
Wow, your flowers are gorgeous. What's your secret?
It's no secret. It's Bear Advanced.
You mean these blue bottles?
Uh-huh. I protect my beauties with all-in-one rose and flower care. It's insect and disease control plus fertilizer.
Really? What's this 12-month tree and shrub protect and feed?
Oh, I use it on my trees. It kills bugs for up to a year, plus it feeds. It's that easy. Hey, where are you going?
To get my own. I want a great yard, too.
Bear Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. Always read and follow label instructions.
Unexpected expenses can hit anyone, and many Floridians turn to small dollar loans to manage those temporary financial challenges. When using a small dollar loan, be sure to choose a state licensed lender. Remember that borrowers have rights under Florida law, including flexible repayment options if you can't repay on time. Make sure you understand the cost and terms of the loan before you borrow, and only borrow what you can afford to pay back. For more information, go to borrowsmartfl.com. This message is brought to you by the Florida Community Financial Services Association.
In a world of tiny tomatoes and backyard pests, one man and his better half dig deep to save backyard gardens.
Joni, stand by to upload expert videos.
Already loaded, Tom.
Wow, you're good.
You're not so bad yourself.
Tom and Joni McCubbin star in hisandhersgardening.com. Critics rave.
Tom and Joni, they really grow on you.
2 green thumbs up.
Don't miss hisandhersgardening.com.
Employ Florida offers resources and services to help you find employment.
Hi, Gary here. Employ Florida helped me improve my interview skills, plus write a great resume. I attended networking events with many employers and other industry professionals just like me. With the workshops and training found at employflorida.com, I was able to land a great job in my field.
Job resources, real results, hired. Employflorida.com. That's employflorida.com.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And Chris Garcia, the former Deputy Director of the United States Department of Commerce. I was impressed, Mike, the way he is able to lay things out on our economics and the tariffs issue. And I said it to him, it's true. You start talking economics with some of your friends. And when you start to get in the details, their eyes just glaze over and you've lost them, you know.
Well, or that, or, you know, everyone has stats because we just Google stats that agree with our own preconceived notions. So it's like you say, well, the economy is growing, and another person finds some way to twist that into a negative. So.
Well, I think Chris cut through a lot of material here today and made it very plain and straightforward.
Well, and there's no doubt that the tariff issue is a big issue with a lot of people in this country. It's really affecting a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
And they're trying to sell the long game, like he said, but that's a hard sell for a lot of manufacturers in this country who are dependent on imports from other countries. So
it is a very hard sell. Well, we hope that you have learned something from today's program and enjoyed our conversation. Scheduled to be with us next week is Kendall Coffey from the Miami area. If it sounds familiar, Kendall Coffey was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida for many, many years. And I'm going back 20 years or so here, but he was in office a long time. He is still active. He is on a South Florida Judicial Nominating and Screening Committee. He's an active law practice. And more importantly, guess what?
What's that?
Kendall Coffey has worked intimately with this guy named Brett Kavanaugh.
Oh.
And
there we go.
His notion is that Brett Kavanaugh will have a tremendous impact on the United States Supreme Court. And keep in mind, Kendall Coffey is a Democrat. Huh? All right. Well, I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
We say thank you for your time on the Florida Roundtable this day, and we invite you to come back 1 week for a Florida Roundtable.
You've been listening to the Florida Roundtable, a news and public affairs presentation of the Florida News Network. The views and opinions expressed during this show are solely those of the participants and not necessarily those of this station's management, ownership, or sponsors. Please email your comments to reagansmith@fnnonline.net.